So we look at this past MVP performance that Lamar Jackson has done. And we have said, look, even though Lamar Jackson might be one of the most electric players, he's not the most electric player, in my opinion. He's definitely one of the most electric players on the football field. There's nothing more electric than extending a play to get a first down. And there was no other player that was better than that than Dak Prescott this past year. So we look at Lamar's numbers this past year and we say, okay, and these are small. These are like not everything like advanced. These are not all advanced stats, but we're gonna say this: Lamar in 16 games threw for 67.2% completion. He had 4,499 scrimmage yards, 21 TDs to 13 turnovers. That is one of the probably the iffiest MVP. Like somebody, any starting quarterback in the league that is at an elite level, that is considered elite, could put up those numbers: 4,500 yards, 29 touchdowns, 30 touchdowns, and 13 turnovers. Anybody can do it. In fact, anybody can do it. Even somebody whose worst season with the New Orleans Saints in 2007 could do it. Do you want to know what Drew Brees did in 2007, Nate?
Enlighten me.
Tell me how similar these stats are, and then tell me if Drew Brees should win MVP after putting these numbers up. So Drew Brees in 2007, he was 67.5% completion. He had 4,475 yards of scrimmage with 29 touchdowns and 22 turnovers. So just about every single stat other than the turnover category is right on the bullseye with Lamar Jackson's MVP season. But yet, we're going to give somebody that had such a mediocre season the MVP because we say, okay, this guy is an electric ball player. But yet, when we go back in past history and it happens with somebody else, Drew Brees wasn't even close to MVP that season. He wasn't even close to it because that is his worst year on the New Orleans Saints was 2007. And I just told you those yards. But we're going to get to some of his best years, and we're going to say, hey, is the MVP award rigged because has Drew Brees earned the MVP award in these number of seasons? And how do we compare Drew Brees' numbers to the people that won MVP that year? And I'm going to get a little messy tonight, Nate Ness. I'm going to get a little messy. So I hope you're ready because I'm so passionate about Drew Brees, and I feel that he was done so bad by the NFL by not getting anything but Offensive Player of the Year. Of course he got Offensive Player. He should have got dang MVP too to go with it. 2 trophies in his trophy case. But because his MVP race is so rigged, do you realize who got 49 votes in this past MVP race? Lamar Jackson got 49 votes in this past MVP race. So you have 50 votes Associated Press comes out with. Do you know who got that one vote, that one other vote?
Patrick Mahomes.
It wasn't even Patrick Mahomes. It wasn't Dak Prescott. It was Josh Allen, the dude who had the most turnovers out the whole league. The dude who could not go a game without having 2 turnovers. Now, you're gonna sit here and tell me that dude now Dak, although he did not go far in the playoffs, MVP is a regular season trophy. That's what they say. Now, people also like to say, well, team's record is considered in that category. I don't care about team record. It's not most valuable team. If it were most valuable team, then there would be a trophy for it. It is most valuable player. It is somebody who is most valuable to their team. They should take a page out of the Heisman Trophy because Lamar, when he won the Heisman Trophy, he was not even close to the best team in the country. But he was the best player in the country in college that year. But his team was not.
No.
So the MVP of college, they are the most valuable player. It is not most valuable team. It never has been. So why do we have this narrative that, hey, this person only won 7 games this year. This person won 13 games this year. Well, Drew Brees has had 2 top 10 defenses in his whole career. But yet he's putting up MVP numbers consistently every year. And you're going to sit here and tell me, okay, a dude that has the most 5,000-yard passing seasons of all time isn't even close hasn't had one MVP. He's led the league in passing 7 times. He's led the league in completion percentage 6 times. He's led the league in completions 6 times. He's led the league in your passing yards per game 6 times. He's actually has the NFL record for a completion percentage and yards per game in a single season. He has those 2 records. And you're going to sit here and tell me that Drew Brees, after 6 times of leading the league in all these categories, is not even close to winning MVP. But I digress. Let's look at some of the numbers. But Nate, I want to ask you, in your professional opinion, before I get into these numbers, and this isn't propaganda because numbers don't lie, ladies and gentlemen. Propaganda does. So we go into this MVP race. Do you think that there is something that needs to change? Even looking at this past season, when we saw that, hey, Lamar Jackson might have had okay numbers, but they're not MVP numbers. Is there something that needs to be changed with this MVP? Is there a narrative that needs to be created to say, hey, this is supposed to be most valuable player, not most valuable team, and so that we can actually bring prestige back to the MVP?
Not now. Most valuable player, to get that award, it also takes, we're talking about the individual award, but also the individual has and the way the team wins, they correlate with each other. You know, how the team's record and so forth, they correlate with each other. Now, we talk about Drew Brees. We talk about Drew Brees, and we talk about just how great he is and so forth and whatnot. I do have to tell you that at that time, and this is not no excuse, but we're talking about a young Tom Brady he was competing against, a young Aaron Rodgers. You know, you had Ben Roethlisberger. You had, you know, some really good Peyton Manning. You had some quarterback. I'm talking about those names in itself. Those are all first ballot Hall of Famers. Now, this year the MVP award, it's crazy because, you know, we talk about these quarterbacks and so forth, and the MVP has become the quarterback award, to be honest with you. It has become the quarterback award because if I had to pick, you know, I can, you know, Lamar Jackson, he's had, you know, some great years, you know, and the thing about it is his numbers, they may not be the 4,500, 4,600 yards passing that Dak Prescott has done and achieved, or, you know, 5,000 yards passing that Patrick Mahomes, you know, does and whatnot. You know, Lamar is must-see TV as folks, you know, characterize him as. You know, he's an excitement. He's an and one mixtape on the football field. And he you know, he puts fans in the stands, and he excites people with the dynamic of running the ball and again throwing. You know, he's Michael Vick 2.0. You know, that's the I guess you can say that's the talk. You know, that's the narrative in regards to Lamar. Now, was he deserving of it, the MVP? His team finished, if I'm not mistaken, what did his team finish?
First in the AFC.
First in the AFC. What was the record?
13-4.
13-4. And Dak finished 12-5. Now they're going to look at that. They both finished first in their respective divisions and winning their division titles. So we don't take anything from them. Dak threw career number in yards, touchdowns, so forth. Both of these individuals came up short in the playoffs. And so forth. The MVP award is very, very skewed.
Oh, I agree.
If you're going to give it to the most valuable player in the league, in my opinion, is 15 in Kansas City, Mahomes.
Were we taking regular season or postseason?
Both. He's the most valuable player because of what he does for his team. And Patrick Mahomes, what he does, you know, from a leadership standpoint, from what he's excitement on the field as well. You know, if we're gonna the MVP award, I want to go I want to go in a different direction. Hold on. Hey, Dad. Take the plugs out. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. You watched basketball in the 90s.
Correct.
All right. The 90s, from 90 all the way up until 99. Who was the best NBA player that played in the NBA?
In the 90s?
Yes.
Give me a second. Let me see. In the 90s, the best NBA player. The best NBA player in the 90s. When did Jordan retire?
Jordan officially retired in 99.
It was Michael Jordan.
Michael Jordan. Okay. Michael Jordan was the best player in the 90s.
That's now.
Okay. That's my opinion. We share the same thing.
Yeah.
I say this because as great as Michael Jordan was, he couldn't get the MVP every year. He was the most invaluable player, but you couldn't give it to him. So I say this, that the MVP award is skewed in so many aspects because Dak was the MVP. He deserved it. But it's a popularity contest if you really want to get real. You know, we say the saying, and one of my favorite sayings, men lie, women lie, numbers don't. Dak's numbers were well deserving. Yet it's popularity. Lamar Jackson, he's entertainment. He is just entertaining when he gets on that field and when he gets going. When, again, from spinning and just running the ball and just doing the things that he does, he does it. Dak doesn't do it as exciting as Lamar. And it's a popularity chase. It's a popularity contest and whatnot. And over the last 10 years, can we pull up the last 10 MVPs?
I got it right here.
Who are the last 10 MVPs?
You want me to tell you in order? Lamar, Mahomes, Rodgers, Lamar, Mahomes, Brady, Matt Ryan, Cam Newton, Rodgers, Manning.
I would say Patrick Mahomes earned all of his MVPs. Aaron Rodgers, same thing. Lamar's very first MVP. Lamar's very first MVP was deserved. Like he took the NFL world by storm. Brady's Brady. Both Matt Ryan and Cam Newton both had seasons that are unforgettable. This MVP is skewed. AP deserves Adrian. He earned his MVP by running for 2K. Essentially it's a popularity contest tied on how your team is doing. That's what it comes down to.
Well, let's talk about some numbers, Nate, because I want to get into this Drew Brees conversation for MVP and why he has never won an MVP in his career. So we go back. I have 3 years here, and you can tell me whether or not that you agree if Drew Brees should be MVP this year or should not, or if he should be close to winning MVP. Now, we go back to 2014 when Aaron Rodgers won MVP. Okay, I'm not going to say the record because in my mind, record should not be considered when you're doing MVP. It should be most valuable player.
Give me numbers.
So I'm going to give you numbers. We'll give you numbers. And I'm not saying anything after 2014. I'm not saying Drew Brees is MVP level. We can talk about when he had a great season in 2018, when he had the greatest percentage passing ever, right? But he didn't throw that many yards. And to me, if you throw a lot of yards, that means you are productive. So in 2014, Aaron Rodgers threw for 4,300 yards, had a 65.6% completion percentage, 38 touchdowns to 5 interceptions, which is crazy. That's really good numbers. He had a 0.9 interception percentage. Very good. And there's really nothing you could say about that. Those are pretty good numbers and possibly MVP. But then you go to 2014 with Drew. Well, Aaron Rodgers led the league that year in interception percentage, of course. Drew led the league in completions, attempts. He had a 69.2% completion percentage, which is almost 3 more than Aaron Rodgers that year. He led the league in passing with almost 5,000 yards, just short with 4,952. Had 309.5 yards per game, led the league, and then he had 33 touchdowns to 17 interceptions, which you can say, okay, well, Aaron Rodgers had more touchdowns, less interceptions, and that's really what it boils down to, right? And we could say that. But Drew Brees is in this conversation for MVP, in my opinion, in 2014. Whether he wins it or not, I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't, right? But these other years, we look back at it. We go back to 2011.
7-9 record.
Drew
That's
Brees did have in 2014, he had a 7-9 record, and Aaron Rodgers had a 12-4. But let's go to when Drew Brees won Offensive Player of the Year in 2011 for the second time. Do you know what his record was, Nate?
13-3.
13-3. Okay, well, Aaron Rodgers won it that year again, and he went 14-1, which won one more game. Cool, perfect. Aaron Rodgers had the best numbers of his career this year. He had 4,643% yards passing, 68.3%, and then he had 45-6 touchdown to interception ratio, and then he led the league in touchdown percentage, set an NFL record for passer rating for that season, which is good. Those are good numbers. My buddy has an argument that J.J. Watt should have won in 2014.
No, he probably
should have. He definitely should have.
I think he had like a 4 or 5 touchdowns on.
Well, we've looked at it, and Aaron J.J. Watt actually was all pro in 2 different positions.
2 different positions, yeah, as a D tackle and a DN and a strong side DN.
So we look back at Aaron Rodgers' 2011 season when Drew Brees ended up winning Offensive Player of the Year. And I just told you those numbers. But let's look at Drew Brees. Drew Brees led the league in completions. He led the league in completion percentage with 71.2. Now, to me, percentage matters a lot because that determines, hey, how many times are my wide receivers going to get the ball during the game? 71% of the time, my wide receivers, there's a ball in their hands. And so Drew Brees, Aaron Rodgers had 4,600 yards. Drew Brees also had a statistical record year, 54-76 for Drew Brees, Nate. Over 800 yards more than Aaron Rodgers. He actually set a record for yards per game with 342.3, led the league in touchdowns with 46 and had 14 picks. Now, 2011, I'm giving it to Drew Brees. And I have a little bias there, but those numbers, Nate, you can tell me everything. Drew Brees checks every check mark there besides interceptions. Mm-hmm. Now, Aaron Rodgers, his interception ratio was 46-14, or not 46-14, 45-6, right? And Drew Brees was 46-14. But the other numbers are so overwhelming compared to Aaron Rodgers. It makes eight more turnovers look negligible.
I mean, you can't front. Those are some crazy numbers. But again, popularity contest. 14-1 beats 13-3.
And it realistically shouldn't, which is why Drew Brees has never won an MVP, because it's a popularity contest.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, Manning in 08. And we're going to get to 08. I'm glad you brought that up, Jack, because let's get to that 08 season when Peyton Manning won MVP. Nate, please tell me if these are MVP numbers. In 2008, Peyton Manning threw 4,002 yards, had a 66.8% completion percentage, not leading the league in any QB category, had a 12-4 record, if you want to talk about record, and had 27-12. Okay? 27-12. 2-1, basically, just about. Just a little over 2-1.
That's all it is, 2-1.
Now, let's look at when Drew Brees won Offensive Player of the Year for the first time. Now, he had a record of 8-8, and you're going to say, okay, well, Connor, that was the reason Drew Brees didn't win MVP. But he led the league in completions another time, attempts another time, had a 65% completion, a little less than he usually has, led the league in passing with what, Nate? 5,069 yards. That is over 1,000 more passing yards than Peyton Manning won in 2008. With 316 yards per game. Guess what, Nate? He also led the league in that. He led the league in touchdowns with 34-17 interceptions. You're going to sit here and tell me that these two guys with 2-1 touchdown interception ratios, but one dude has 1,000 more yards than the other one. Do you know how many games Peyton Manning would have to play to get 1,000 more yards? Do you want to be real? He would have to play, probably more than 3. He had 4,000 yards in 16 games, meaning he threw for 250 yards a game, Okay, to get 1,000 more yards, he has to play 4 more games in order to reach Drew Brees' level of prestige that year. And you're going to sit here and tell me just because a player with a better record that has underwhelmingly worse stats than the person with the lower record is going to win it because it's not most valuable player at the end of the day. It's most valuable team.
8-8. 8-8. Drew was 8-8 that year.
We might as well call it most valuable team if we're going to give it to the person with the better record every time.
8-8. Popularity contest. 8-8 because those numbers. I mean, they both threw 2-to-1 ratio interceptions. Drew, if I'm not mistaken, did he have the interception high that year in the league? That was 17.
Nope, I don't think so. Did he? I don't know. It doesn't tell me, but it's not his high in interceptions any season.
But
no, it hasn't. No, it does tell me he did not lead the league. He led the league with in interceptions in 2012.
He threw for 43 and 19. Okay.
But he also led in touchdowns. So let's not forget that.
This comes at the heel of, again, what I
agree.
What I've said before. Again, the numbers and the team. I mean, the how your team is playing. Again, they correlate. And I feel that Peyton, he shouldn't have got the MVP award, but I mean, they gave it to him because that year the Colts were playing great football. If I'm not mistaken, the Colts, did they go to the Super Bowl that year?
I think they might have. That 2000.
The next year,
they might have won Super Bowl.
The next year,
in 2008. But
Drew Brees and the Saints knocked off the Colts in Super Bowl. So, I mean, you got to also, I mean, this is the reality of it. Is the numbers may be great, yet people are going to, the voters are going to take in, okay, how does his numbers correlate and translate to wins and losses with the team? Like, how does that affect it? Is he really that big of again, an important piece to this team? Like, if we take him off of this team, how does that, correlate? How does this team do? How does this team fare and whatnot? And then on top of that, that was Peyton Manning. His last name is Manning.
Popularity kind.
Yeah.
But I want to talk to you about, look, Drew Brees has only had a top 10 defense twice in his entire career. So you're going to tell me that because the Saints have failed to build a team around Drew Brees like other teams have, we're going to punish the person that has MVP numbers? We're going to punish him?
Okay, we have the same conversation when it comes to Tom Brady and Peyton Manning. We have the same conversation when it comes to Brady and Manning. And this is in regards to Brady has won 7 titles, 7 Super Bowls. And the knock to, I guess you can say, the conversation that's had with the battle of Manning Brady is the fact that Brady had Belichick in a top 10 defense every year compared to Manning, who's never had really a top 10 defense. And when and again, that's the conversation that's going to be had regardless. We can't use that play into this conversation. Why? Because we're talking about an individual award. We're talking about an individual award. Award that really is not individual award because it's predicated and tied to team success and whatnot. Again, Cam Newton. Again, I'm gonna just use Cam for an example. The year he won MVP, threw for 35 touchdowns, 10 interceptions, and ran for another, I think, 5 or 10 more touchdowns. His team was 15-1 and went to the Super Bowl, lost to the Denver Broncos. His team had a hell of a year. He was nothing but he had to have been the MVP. Now we go to was it the year before? Matt Ryan wins his MVP. He has a career year and touchdowns, and he threw a less amount of interceptions, and his team goes to the Super Bowl and they lose to the Patriots. He was the MVP that year because of the numbers that he put up and what his team was doing, and those numbers correlated to team victories and what the team was.
It's just you look at and I know you have less players on the court, but you look at teams, you look at basketball. The MVP is always the person with the best stats in the league because that is the person that is the most dominant in the league. Whether or not Joel Embiid won MVP, didn't go far in the playoffs. Okay. And we're going to say, okay, well, Joel Embiid is MVP. He's got the best stats in the league, but yet he has failed to do what these other people are doing. So he's got a worse record, even though he probably was first seed that year. He's failed to bring his team to the playoffs. And then we're going to say, okay, well, Drew Brees has the best stats in the entire league. Failed to bring his team to the playoffs because of the team around him, but we're going to punish him and not give him MVP when we see it in other sports 100 times to none. And so college football and NBA have MVP right. They are going to give it to the person that is the most valuable player. Therefore, they're going to give it to the person that, hey, you have the best stats. We see how well you've done on your team. You might have not had the greatest record, but because you have been so instrumental in your team to get that record, we're going to give it to you. And I want to address this comment. We just looked at stats with Drew Brees. The margin between him and Peyton Manning and Aaron Rodgers, it was not slim. He had over 1,000 more yards than Peyton Manning. If that is slim, you need to go look up slim in the dictionary because obviously you don't know what it means.